that's something that, I think is as a big topic of conversation.
Hello, and welcome to Hired the Podcast. As always, or most of the time, I am Travis Miller. I'm always Travis Miller, but I'm not always the host of Hired the Podcast. Conversation with the best and brightest minds in the world of work. Today, I'm super excited to be joined by an incredible voice on this topic, Ann Wyatt. Ann's the president and owner of Ann Wyatt Recruiting and the host of the podcast Workforce 4.0. She's, like I said, she's one of the leading voices in employment in the world of manufacturing. And she's joining us after a week-long stint hosting Automate Live with Chris Lukey at the Automate Show here in Chicago. And we were just talking about this before we hit record, and it sounds like after that, you slept for a couple of days.
I did. I had to go home and rest up. I was in Nashville before Automate, right before Automate, and then Automate for the entire week, and then came home and packed again and went off to Grand Rapids to help out Chris Lukey and his partner Swipe Guide in their Manufacturing Happy Hour Roadshow tour. Which,
from everything I heard, was a great event. I could not attend the event in Chicago. I had that night, my daughter, 8-year-old daughter, was in a theater camp, and they did, a bunch of 8-year-olds did a performance of Hamilton.
Oh, that's fun.
It was fun. I was happy they did an edited version. I was a little worried about some of the lyrical and content choices, but they made it appropriate for 8-year-olds. It was great.
Well, that's really cool. I bet you were so proud of her.
So proud. She's such a ham. I mean, you can just tell the kids that she is not going to ever have a fear of public speaking in her life.
That's awesome. I feel like, and in manufacturing especially, and really in business overall, it's really important for women to be encouraged at a young age to be fearless and have that ambition and that drive to just go out and be yourself, and that it's okay. So I love that you support that for her.
Absolutely. And speaking of performing, I'm trying out a new bit here to start off the episode. I want to know what you think of it. Ann, what's your go-to karaoke song?
Oh, I love that bit. That's my favorite
I know that's
one.
your bit. Ann starts every show off asking her guests what their go-to karaoke song is. And I was planning this out. I'm like, I'll ask Ann because nobody ever asks her. And then I listened to the start of like 4 or 5 episodes. And I'm like, no, that's not true. Everybody asks Ann what her go-to karaoke song is.
Everybody has started asking me that, but they didn't when I first started Workforce 4.0. And it's been a lot of fun. Now people ask me and I'm like, thank you. I would love to share my karaoke song with you. And you can use that bit as much as you want to, because music, to me at least, makes the world go round. But I really want to try out a couple of songs. And you tell me what you think, Travis. You think if I could cut it. Okay. All right. So I'm thinking that I really haven't done the Cranberry song.
Which one?
Zombie. I really want to try that one out because my sister-in-law always sing that all the time at like our family get-togethers.
That'd have to be a performance. It depends on the quality of your vocal range, because she's got a powerful instrument there.
She does, right? Do you think I could hack it? Do you think I should try it?
I think you should try it for sure. Is there anything that you've tried and halfway through you're like, I've made a giant mistake?
I mean, that's the fun of doing karaoke, I think.
Absolutely.
You just try stuff and sometimes it's great and sometimes you're just not feeling it. You know what I mean? I'd have to say there was a song that I did one time, and I can't remember if it was Sublime, maybe what I got. And normally, and sometimes it just depends on the mood, right? So normally I do a pretty decent job of that song. But for whatever reason, I just got up there and was like, why did I choose this? You get to the rapping part and it's like,
life is
I
too
should have
short, so
picked
love the
Jewel.
one you got, because you might get run over or you might get shot. Duet
That's
it. We'll
right.
duet it next time.
We will have to do that. You'll have to come on my show and then we can just do the whole episode.
So I love that opening segment to your show, because it does such a good job of getting your guests comfortable. They're like, oh, I can talk about this. This is fun. This is something I can talk about. And I wonder if you have any strategy like that, or do you counsel the companies that you're working with that as you're interviewing a candidate, start off with something just a little off the wall, something a little personal that they don't have to think real hard about, just to kind of get them comfortable in that situation. Is that something that you put into practice?
I do. And that's really something that I don't kind of advertise to my clients. But yeah, as part of my screening process, it's my job, I feel like, to inherently make candidates comfortable in speaking with me and sharing things with me. So a lot of times when I'm recruiting, I'll use different tactics of, like I'll pick their location or whatever. And if they're in a city that I've been to, I'm like, oh yeah, I was there back in, 2018, and it was such a great experience for me. And, I really like that one dive bar on that one, on First Street or whatever. And they're like, oh yeah, I've been there. So that kind of gets the conversation started a little bit. But that is a tactic that I use, and I try to find different ways to do that. So if it's not a city, I choose something else that I can build that common ground with the candidate and start working on building that relationship from the very first conversation.
As a recruiter, how much coaching or advice do you give to the people that are doing the interviewing? Because we're entrusting, or I don't want to say we're entrusting, but these people that are doing the hiring, most of them don't have a ton of experience in it. And that's fine. It's not their profession. I'm not an engineer. I would never dream of going into a facility and saying, well, let me tell you about how to fix this problem you're having with your robotic arm. We recruit a lot of people that can do that, but that's not my expertise.
Right. Yeah.
And I think about most leaders will conduct how many interviews per year, depending on the size of their team, depending on the size of their workforce, depending on their role. I guess a lot of them it's 5, 10, maybe 20, not if they're in a talent acquisition capacity, but how much coaching do you give them to help them conduct the best interview to land the candidates that they really want to land?
That is a great question. And I love that. So I don't really, I don't guess I would think about it as formally like coaching them. But if there are things that I pick up during the screening process, I will reiterate that I think that the client will like, if that makes sense, then I will reiterate those things. I am more prone to get everyone in a conversation before I start screening candidates.
Okay.
And I will go over KPIs and hard skill sets and desired recommendations, requirements, and things like that. And I, during this process, want to meet with everyone that is on the hiring team because I want everyone's different opinion at that point. And then I kind of build my screening based on what their requirements are, if that makes sense.
No, that makes perfect sense.
And then I do prep the candidates a little bit. I'll work with them and I have like an interactive interview prep guide that I'll send them just to kind of reiterate, okay, this is what you're supposed to do during an interview. This is how you answer situational based questions, which are, still pretty popular. And I work with them. But I think, at the end of the day, if you kind of get a good read on the company and what the culture is, and then you are screening against those requirements with the candidate, and then you can get a good read on the candidate that way, I think the rest kind of naturally takes care of itself.
I would hope so. Most of the time, occasionally you hear horror stories about leaders asking inappropriate questions or trying to gamify the system to figure out things that they can't ask questions about. But most of them are pretty good. But I'm in the same boat as you. I don't do it a lot either. We don't do it a lot either to coach people on how to conduct an interview. But now is our opportunity. If you were to give advice to most of the people that are doing the interviews that aren't skilled at it, or don't, I won't say not skilled at it, but don't practice it as much as people like us, what advice would you give them when conducting an interview?
Well, I would advise them to, I really like, this is not a popular opinion, I don't think. But I think that in the age of data analytics, this goes a long way. But I would advise you to work with your interviewing process, have a pretty, not necessarily systemized interviewing process, but have general metrics in place for interviewing. And then I really like the scored interviews. I don't think that that's super popular, but I also think that if you can objectively say, this person meets all of these qualifications and they would be good at the position, then I think that's the best way to go about it. You can also build in cultural questions into your interviewing process. I like situational based interview questions. I know, again, that's really not very popular, but it does let you get a better grasp of the full spectrum of their experience level, if that makes sense. And it also tells you things.
Tell me about a time when you were working with a difficult hiring authority and how you handle. Let's do some situational interviewing. No, it's challenging, and we've tried that before, and especially we've tried that for us to come up with a systemized interviewing process to be able to score candidates in all these different categories. It's just hard. It is
really hard. It is really hard. And then if you have a whole team scoring, and that's really where I enjoy the high functional teams, the companies that have that high functional team environment where it's like 100% transparency, because you never have to worry about the politics of an organization don't get in the way as much, right? It's like, yes, today I'm showing up as Ann Wyatt, and I'm Ann Wyatt yesterday, and I'm Ann Wyatt tomorrow, and this is what Ann Wyatt's opinion is. And then being able to come to a group opinion on someone, it's a lot harder than I think sometimes that you do that. So if you have those metrics in place, it kind of gives you a good sounding guideline where you can make sure that you're making the best objective decisions for the organization at large. Does that make sense?
No, it makes perfect sense, because so often when companies are making this decision, we fall into this trap too. It's not an objective decision. It's a subjective decision. And I always question organizations that we work with, or they have call it a thorough hiring process. Some might lovingly refer to it as a long hiring process. We'll call it thorough. And there's, 5, 6, 7, 8 people involved. There might be panel interviews with potential coworkers and colleagues, and assessments and intelligence tests and all of these things. And at any given point, if one person just goes like this, they're done. And I was always curious why the no is more powerful than the yes. Can you imagine flipping that if
exactly
everybody said no, to someone, but one person said yes, then they would hire them. But in so many organizations, even if one person says no, they're done. And I was always curious why the no had more power than the yes when it comes to hiring.
I don't know. That's a good question. And I think that's something that, we're kind of advocating for in all of this work that we're doing. I mean, really, that's the base of it, right? I started my podcast to really emphasize the importance of technology and how that's improving recruitment efforts and retention efforts, and how, it's going to have to happen, because if we're looking at the sheer numbers of the workforce, there's just no mitigating that. And also to advocate for, maybe we need to change our mindset a little bit, and maybe we need to consider things like transferable skills. And if somebody has aptitude and attitude, how do we deploy technology that can get them up to speed skills wise? And I know that you started your podcast for probably a lot of the same reasons. And at the end of the day, I think that's really kind of what we're out to do, is shift that mindset and say, we understand that this isn't the purple squirrel or unicorn you were looking for, but this person meets 90% of your requirements. And if there's anything that we can do to supplement any gaps here, why not do that?
Yeah, absolutely. I like to take the approach. There are I hear so many hiring authorities and so many recruiters out there say, tell me about the ideal candidate. Who is the perfect person for this job? And although I want to know that because I'm curious about it, what I really want to know is, what does the worst candidate look like? What is someone's absolute bare minimum level of experience for them to be barely competent enough to keep their job? So we've identified that baseline.
That's a good way of looking at it.
Well, let's identify everybody that meets that bare minimum requirement. And let's talk to every single person above that line so that we can uncover the potential. Let's uncover all of the things, the transferable skills, the soft skills, the things that can't be identified on a resume. You can't match this part of the resume to that part of the job description. If you're always trying to widen the pool and the organization is open to lowering the expectations, the purple squirrel isn't what you can do. I think the purple squirrel is who the person is.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think that we have to educate clients on that some as well. And I don't know if you ever find yourself in that position where you try to work with your clients and educate them a little bit more on, what defines the purple squirrel to them, and where the gaps could be with potential candidates that you're submitting.
Yeah, I don't know how much educating we can do, especially in the moment. I've had, let's say, potential customers not yell at me, but get firm with me. You're presenting me all these people that are unqualified, or you just keep wanting to jam someone in here so that you can get paid your fee. And I just don't feel that's it. It's just an understanding that there are so many things that you can train. Let's figure that out. Let's figure out what you can train. What can somebody learn in their first 3 to 6 months on the job, so that we can focus on hiring everything that you can't train, you can't coach. And have you been successful in trying to educate your customers and potential customers on developing that mindset?
Yeah. So I try to do that. And I'll also, when I'm screening for candidates, I don't ask the base level question. That's a good question to ask. But, I do ask about, the absolute perfect ideal fit for this role. And then I will go find that individual And I will present that I'll screen that individual and I will present that individual to the client and kind of let them make that decision and decide from there. But when I'm submitting candidates, I guess I submit 5 or so per position, multiple candidates, right? I'm sure you all do as well. And then if we do have to have that intermittent meeting, right, in the process where you're stopping, you're like, okay, hold up, stop, because something's not quite right here. You ever experience that? Okay,
let's have a calibration call.
Yes, let's circle the wagons and kind of get together and decide where we are lacking in the search process here, because it doesn't seem to be hitting all the marks, we'll say. So during that process, I think it's really important and if I haven't already done the client's evaluation side of it, that's the point I will break that out. And I'll say, okay, I need to know specifically what your metrics are and go from there. So I don't know if you use kind of a partner evaluation tool or a client evaluation tool, but that helps me.
We don't. A lot of times it's kind of just feel like it's almost like they're searching for reasons to swat away people that we think would be good fits for their organization. Just ban them left and right. Dikembe Mutombo. No. You kind of get the feeling that these aren't organizations that truly value the people that are working there. They're the ones that are focused on the skills. And as much as I'd love to change the mindset of organizations that have that philosophy, I'm not sure how many minds we can change versus working to identify the companies that do value not just what a person can do, but who the person is doing it. And I'd almost just rather work to find those companies than to educate the ones that don't and help those organizations find the best people who have the most potential to help them succeed, because I want those companies to succeed more than the other ones a little bit.
Yeah. I mean, and that's so common on the recruiting blogs. I don't know. Are you on any of those? Are you on, like, there's a big one on Facebook called Herc. Are you on that one? David Stephen Patterson?
I'm not on that one.
It's a good one. It's a pretty good one. But that's something that, I think is as a big topic of conversation in all the recruiting calls, right? Is like, how do we teach these clients? So, I agree with you. And I think that most recruiters out there probably agree with that. Another tool that I think is really helpful in recruiting is actually the power over attention study. And if you go and you do exit interviews of employees, former employees, and you get down to it, I would almost guarantee you that a lot of your reasons for leaving is going to come down to culture. It's going to point back to that. So, if that's a situation where you're seeing a super high turnover rate, and you're like, oh, it can't be the culture, because in all fairness, I think a lot of corporations do spend a lot of money trying to improve their culture. I think, sometimes they just miss in certain regards. Maybe middle management is a good place to look for that. But a lot of times those retention studies will come back and they will point directly to your culture. And then it has to be on you to take that data, which is people data, like what you get from the machines, but people, right? I mean, you've got data here that supports that it's culture related. And then what you do with that is important.
Yeah. What do you do with that? I mean, and culture is something that no matter how much money you throw at it, if the person or people leading the culture of the organization are broken, I'm not sure how much money you can throw at it to fix it.
Money does not fix culture.
No.
That is a leadership driven initiative. And I know that we say that all the time, right? But truly, it's got to come from the top down, and it's got to be driven throughout the organization. And it's hard. It is extremely hard. And, it takes a lot of time to improve culture. So it's a big commitment.
So what advice would you give to a leader? And if you have any examples of organizations that, it's probably a pretty small subset of leaders who have identified that there is a cultural issue within their organization. They're able to identify that leadership is part of the cultural problem. We want to change it, but we don't know how. What advice would you give to that small subset of people?
Well, I think that you've got to work on identifying where that specific gap is within your organization, and kind of evaluating where your feedback is coming from. If there is a big pain point there, then I think, we've got to initiate some culture training sessions, if you will. And there's so many different types of those, right? And SHRM is a great resource. If you have any listeners that are in the Society of Human Resource Managers, their website has a ton of resources, and there's a lot of industry partners out there that also improve cultural in cultural issues if you have that. But you have to identify where the source is in any misalignments in culture. And, and then you kind of have to have these trainings and assess where you can improve, and appoint champions within your organization that are going to continue to build and drive stronger cultures.
I want to flip the conversation a little bit, because we've been talking about the leadership side quite a bit. But if an individual is out there searching for their next opportunity, what do you feel that they should be doing, or the questions they should be asking, or the things that they should be looking for to determine if an organization does have that healthy culture that is going to match with their values and allow them to thrive?
Yeah, that's a great question. And again, with candidates are people, so not one size fits all, right? And everyone's always asking, like, what do I do to fix culture? What do I do to fix recruitment efforts? What do we do to fix retention? It is not one thing. There is no secret sauce here. It's a variety of different things, and really changing the corporation's mindset to evolve with those things of what your workforce wants, and there's tools for that. But when I'm working with a candidate that is interested in making a change of jobs, right? And they're looking for companies that they want to work for, I always advise them to write down things that they value. What are the top 5 things that you value in an organization, ideally? Like, if you could pick anywhere to work, where would that place be? And then what specifically about that place do you like? And then what are your must-haves when you are looking for a new role? Because that's going to look very different to just depending on who you are, right? I mean, some candidates that I work with, they are, I would dare say they're more like me. Like, they're fine with longer hours and the longer shifts and things like that. Other candidates, they may value work-life balance more than they value title or financial compensation or what have you. So it's really about what you want, and what your needs are, if that makes sense.
No, that makes perfect sense. We go through an exercise with on the candidate side that we work with called clamps, where we're recruiters. We need as many acronyms in our life as possible.
That's right.
So clamps stands for challenge, location, advancement, money, people, and security. And we ask them to rank what are their top three. Which of these three things are most important to you in which order? And we'll ask why. And then we'll turn and ask, well, why aren't these three important to you? Not that they're not important, but why didn't you choose to rank any of those in your top three? And you just made me realize that something in there needs to be, we need to change our acronym, that balance or family or outside of work needs to be included in there too, because that's wildly important to a lot of people these days.
Yeah. And I should clarify, I am infamously famous for talking about how there is no way that myself as a single mom could go work on a manufacturing floor because it's very inflexible shifts, right?
Mm-hmm.
So I am fortunate enough to work from home, and because of that, I am fortunate enough to work a lot more than I normally would if I were somewhere. But I think work-life balance is very important to a lot of candidates, especially the younger generations and especially to women, because a lot of that parental responsibility is still on us. So that's something that we really have to be cognizant of in manufacturing. That's something that I would like to see change. Yeah,
absolutely. But I'm similar. I'm fortunate to be in an environment and with an organization where I told you my daughter was in a production of Hamilton, and for 6 weeks straight, I had to leave 45 minutes early once a week to get her to rehearsal on time. How can manufacturers that have plants and systems in place up and running, how do you think they can facilitate an environment where you allow life to happen? I mean, I'm not talking about people can come and go as they see fit, but
sure,
things happen. And family is important, and things outside of your work life are incredibly important. How can manufacturing facilities try to be a bit more accommodating, if that's something that's important to their cultural values, for the people that they want to join their organization?
Yeah, that's a great question. There's a lot of companies that are trying out this parent shift concept, and I'm very interested in, because I'm like a nerd at heart, like labor market information, economic development, all this stuff. So I I like to learn more about this stuff and what other companies are kind of out there doing and innovating. And so Purdue University, they did a big study on the parent shift and flexibility back a couple of years ago, and they published a paper on that. But several companies are trying out what they're calling the parent shift. And that's essentially, that starts at like 7:30 in the morning and then ends at, 3:30 in the afternoon, so that the parents are able to drop their children off at school and then still be there when they get off the bus. And I think that's really fascinating, something that I'm interested in monitoring a few years down the line and still saying, okay, was this successful? Did this work? Is this the answer? That kind of thing. So the parent shift has been pretty popular, I think, over the last couple of years. And then also just being more tolerable of the point system. Like, I know that we need the point system, I guess. But that's really where is your biggest pain point as a manufacturing plant? Do you need 50 engineers, or do you need 50 frontline workforce operators? Mm-hmm. Okay. So those are salary positions versus non-salary positions, right? So salary positions do get a lot of benefits and perks that non-salary positions would not necessarily get, right? And one of those perks, I think, is PTO and leave. So instead, we give, our hourly frontline workforce, we give them the point system,
Mm-hmm.
whereas we give annual leave and all that to our salary positions. So I think trying to figure out some way to mitigate that and trying to be creative in what we allow for the point system would help us out tremendously. Now, I'm not saying that, if you have an employee that's, constantly late for work, constantly calling in, I understand that. But, if you have really good employee that maybe they're just going through a rough patch, if that makes sense,
Yeah.
because especially if they have little kids, I mean, mine looked the wrong way and got in with spike of fever. I mean, kids do this. This is part of what children do. I mean, especially when they're really little, right? They get sick with everything. And then what's even better is they give it to you.
Oh,
and
yeah.
then you're sick with it.
It was about a year and a half ago. It was so traumatic that I remember it vividly. It started with some friends of ours had a date planned for their anniversary for months, and their babysitter fell through at the last minute. And they asked if their daughter could spend the night at our house. And it was her first time spending the night away from their house, not with grandma and grandma. And she came over and she caught the stomach flu in the middle of the night.
Oh, God.
And just sleeping next to my daughter, and we have to go in there and clean it up. 2 days later, my daughter gets the stomach flu. So she's out from school for 4 or 5 days. Then my wife gets the stomach flu. Then my son gets the stomach flu.
It's one at a time. It's never all of you.
Oh, yeah. And then as soon as all 4 of us had got the stomach flu, then my daughter got strep throat. Then my son got strep throat. Then I got COVID. Then my daughter, it was just, we had one person in our house, at least one person in our house, and usually at least one sick kid for over a month and a half straight. And my wife was in a position where she was an hourly employee, and her boss, pardon my language, gave her so much shit about missing work because she had sick children that she immediately started looking for a new job. And she got one shortly after that because she felt so unappreciated because she had to take some time off. And it was mutual. I was out just as much as she was. She's like, what do you want me to do? I have sick children at home. She's like, well, you got to prioritize. And it was kind of, yeah, again, pardon me, but prioritize this.
Yeah, right. I mean, where are we going? What do you think happens? This kills me. See, this is what I'm talking about because that is the way it works. So I only have the one, but now my brother, he's got 4 at his house. And, of course, he and his wife. And I'm just, they're going to listen to this and be like, really? But, not to whatever. But when one of them gets sick, they are down. That whole house is down for a month.
Yep.
Because it just keeps passing on to the next person. And the stomach bug is notorious. I mean, in my experience, the stomach bug is notorious for when Phoenix brings it home. He's sick, and then I'm never sick at the same time. Like right. He is sick for a week, and then I'm sick for 3 or 4 days after that. So, I mean, and someone has to take off with them. We cannot, we can't just drop them off at childcare when they're sick, right? They will send them immediately home. So that's 2 weeks off of work, essentially. So, if you think about the point system and you say you got 5 points, right? So that's the average, right? 5 points, something like that.
Yeah.
And so every time you're late, it's like half a point. Every time you call in, that's 1 point, right? So if you're out for 2 weeks with a sick kiddo, then by my calculations, you were fired a week ago.
Yeah.
And, I mean, things like that happen, and we have to be super conscious about that. And it surprises me that we're not more conscious about that, because stomach bug is not a new thing. I mean, this is not like
No, it's not a new thing. And a lot of times people in those frontline roles, people that are out in the field, those people are incredibly hard to find, particularly really good ones who you can build a level of dedication within them to your organization. And you got a sick kid, you missed 5 days. Sorry, you're gone.
Exactly. And those are really, I mean, really and truthfully, if you look at the hiring needs of most manufacturing facilities and plants out there, I mean, that's really where the skills gap is. It's with your frontline workforce. It's not with your salaried employees.
It's one of the biggest things we get asked to help with, and we can't, because to find those individuals is wildly difficult. And you see so many companies treat them as expendable commodities.
Yeah. I don't have a big appreciation for that either. They're extremely difficult to recruit. They have had such poor experiences that it's evident, I think, in a lot of the interviews that I've had. I don't usually recruit operators either. I have recruited some maintenance techs, some tool and die techs, things like that. I don't know. That to me is the biggest elephant in the room, is what we can do better to improve our relations with frontline workforce.
I think you hit the nail on the head here a couple of minutes ago. It's to value them, to value those individuals the same way you value just about any salaried employee. And it just doesn't matter if somebody, and I think it goes back to the soft skills that we were talking about earlier. If somebody can enhance the values that your company holds dear, it doesn't matter if the person is mopping the floor or leading the entire organization, that you should value and do everything you can to create an environment where that person wants to thrive. And the types of things that you're talking about, it does not show a level of dedication to the people choosing to work for your organization. So why on earth should they be dedicated to you?
That's right. And I don't know. We've got to do more, I think, to shift that mentality.
If you were leading a manufacturing organization, Ann, what would be the first thing you would do to shift that?
Oh gosh. Well, I'll throw the disclaimer out there that I am in HR and not operations, but I guess, the first starting place is to really assess where you are, get a good assessment of where you currently are with all of those things. And I think all of those things are fractional HR, but I mean, they still fall under HR. Is really like assessing where your culture, the health of your culture, and assessing the health of your recruitment strategies and policies and how you're currently doing things. And then looking at your retention rates. And I think it's not just one of those things. It's all of those things. It's the entire life cycle of the employee. And that starts from the day that they fill out that application to the day they leave. And really analyzing that.
It starts at the top. It's the values put forth by the people leading the ship, leading the organization, flow all the way down to everyone there. And every company says we value our people. but if you don't show it, it's going to show. And this conversation has been fantastic. I really appreciate it. What should people be reaching out to you about, and what's the best way for them to find you?
Sure. You can reach out to me for, I just feel like I'm kind of the sister of industry now at this point. So if you just want to reach out and say hello, that's fine. But LinkedIn is a good way to reach out to me. I do recruitment services, retained searches, and then packages. So if you're interested in that kind of thing, but you are not already working with the amazing crew at Miller Resource Group.
It's all right. The industry is big enough to support the both of us. I have no problem with you plugging what you do here on this show. Don't feel bad.
So you can reach out to me for that. Or if you want to reach out and be a guest on Workforce 4.0, Travis, we'd love to have you.
Sounds fantastic. Ann Wyatt Recruiting, host of Workforce 4.0. Really appreciate you spending the time here. And this has been Hired the Podcast. As always, I'm Travis Miller. Big thank you to our producer, Noah Cuff. And we'll talk to you all soon.